Hello, everyone. Today I'm looking at Doom, the Dark Ages. Um, I really like this game. I was a bit skeptical to this one coming out because they had this whole stand and fight thing. And oh yeah, I forgot the intro that I was going to give to this one is original Doom is Rip and Tear, 2016 is Run and Gun, Eternal was Dash and Flash, and Dark Ages is Zoom and Boom. So what I have to say is that one of the main key aspects, I think, to the Doom formula, and this will go off on a tangent later about modern versus classic gaming in general, is about speed, and that's why I was really hyped for Eternal, where it was like, hey, you're gonna go even faster now. We're gonna introduce dashing, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. Now we can like, I love high impact, fast paced gameplay. I mean, that's kind of what games are about. And the whole aspect of having a fast game is just, it tickles me somewhere in my autistic Sonic brain. I like going fast. And so I was a bit dismayed when they said, oh, you're going to stand and fight. Well, I mean, you do stand and fight, but there's just a million things going on together. And the first thing that they introduced to you is the shield bash, which you kind of hold down L and you dash towards your enemies, and it could be like almost across the map basically, and you can take out any enemy. So the movement is not an issue at all, but there's a lot more kind of strategy, I would say, but kind of universal strategy. So the one thing that I think a lot of people didn't like, I personally didn't really super like about Eternal, is that each enemy type had its own very specific strategy, and that still is the case here. There's always kind of the best way to tackle, X, enemy. For example, with the shield bash, what's really interesting about it is that while it'll lock on and zoom to the closest target, it also create a shockwave barrier. And for the lowest level enemies, like the imps and the soldiers, this like obliterates them in a total area of effect. Like they're just completely decimated. So yeah, you could shoot them all individually if you wanted to, but using the shield bash is a way more effective technique. But the kind of very specific strategy, like you have to shoot the Arachnotrons, thing, and you have to deal with the Mancubus this way. That's kind of gone, and what they've opted for, which is better, is a universal strategy, which is parrying. So every time one of the major enemies glows green or they have a green projectile, if you just tap L, you will be able to send it back to them. And I guess on that point, you can also adjust the parry window for exactly how precise that timing is. And I'd say on the default settings, even on Nightmare, it's very generous with the timing for the parry window. But you can actually go into the settings and adjust the parry window to extremely tight timing. And along with that, there's a bunch of other settings and the difficulty thing that I thought were really cool. The main one being game speed, which again, I'll talk about speed later. But I thought there were cool things like you could change the color of your auto map. You could change, your reticle, your HUD display, heads up display. You can change a lot of different aspects of the game, hyper customizable, that I found was really, really cool. One example is, of course, in Eternal, you kind of had button mapping where you could switch, you'd switch via buttons, like what would do what. But in here, you have every aspect of the game, everything from the Atlan controls to the dragon controls to the main menu controls, and you can completely remap everything. So the customizability in Doom: The Dark Ages is maybe not something people would talk about, but for me, it personally impressed me, and it led me. I was kind of halfway through the game, and I finally got the BFC. So in this game, of course, it's all medieval themed, and so the BFG is now a giant crossbow, which I guess in that time would be basically, the equivalent of a gun or a nuke or whatever. And so once you get that ultimate weapon, it's auto mapped to, I think, Y on Xbox. And so when that happened, I realized, okay, I've pretty much unlocked everything in the game at this point. And so I had this little experiment where I went using quick resume. I went in between each Doom game and remapped everything, and I kind of had a universal mapping setting. And what I kind of realized is that A should always be jump, and ever since the first Doom game, or the first 2016 remaster, remake, whatever, the ability to punch was mapped to R, and that was like right stick, click in, and that's for used for melee, for blood punch, for glory kills, and to constantly tap the right stick does not feel good. It feels really, really bad. So what I ended up doing is, ever since the first Doom, I've remapped it to the B button. Like, B to melee just makes so much sense to me and is the proper way just to play it. And and even though Doom 1 doesn't support that, I was able to use the button mapping or whatever on the Xbox, which is a bit clunky because it'll remap it even outside of a gameplay. So if I need to exit the menu, I have to click in, I think, the right stick, which is a little bit weird, but anyway. But I found that the universal kind of mechanics between each game, the triggers you don't have to worry about because that's fire, quick swap, and equipment, start and select, whatever, and the D-pad a little bit, but A and B were always jump and melee. So it was X, Y, and the D-pad that I kind of had difficulty with. And what I kind of realized is that by automatically through most of these games, Y is your BFG or your ultimate super weapon. And like, you just don't use it that often. Like, you might have to use it in an emergency, but it's still not that often. So I, throughout all of them, I remapped Y to up on the D-pad. And it's weird, I forgot in Eternal that your super weapon, like the BFG is part of just your normal loadout. So your super weapon is actually the Crucible or the Hammer in the DLC. And so I just mapped the super weapons to up on the D-pad. Down the D-pad was always info and display. And the side D-pad were always like change equipment and like other kind of weird stuff. And X was always chainsaw. And in this game, of course, there isn't a chainsaw, which is, I guess, a little bit weird, kind of, for a Doom game to not have a chainsaw in Dark Ages, but so be it. And X just kind of became an empty button. I mean, I could map it in the first game to chainsaw, but X kind of became just the use button. It would just became a non-use button, but that kind of made the most sense amongst all the games. It was the most consistent kind of layout that I ended up using. I guess just the last thing on settings before I move on to the actual game is that the prime way I find I play this game is completely HUDless. This game is very, like, it's beautiful. It's really interesting, not only from a graphical standpoint, but art design standpoint, the character designs, the environments. So the very first thing, I remove motion blur, I remove the HUD, and I have a completely perfect cinematic experience that's perfect for taking screenshots. And someone actually once challenged me on this, like, oh, why would you remove motion blur? It doesn't it add to the effect of the whole thing? And the answer is not really / kind of sometimes. I forget the first game where I realized motion blur was just BS and just unnecessary. But the main thing for me is that when you're taking screenshots and you're taking constant screenshots, motion blur just turns everything into a big slushy mess. And while it might look good during gameplay, it doesn't look good enough to justify. Honestly, I think it looks better without motion blur. So you're taking screenshots, you're in the middle of combat, and you'll take a screenshot and you'll look and you'll think, oh, that won't be anything interesting. And you come back at it and you're like, oh, that's actually really cool. Like, I'm in the middle of like using my flail on an Arachnotron. And yeah, so no. So HUDless, motion blur off, that's my ultimate optimal solution. And you think, oh, well, you can't see your health, you can't see your ammo. It doesn't really matter. Because the screen will always go red when you are on low health anyway, so I know that's when I have to pick up health and items. But aside from that, I don't need to know exactly how much health I have. I don't need to know if I have 100 or 150. I'm always picking up items on the map, and moving so fast anyway, it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, no, HUDless, cinematic, fast-paced gameplay is how to do it, my opinion. Also, the other thing I did is I turned down the gamma to like 75. I know, I just like darker games in general. I realized this with Gears of War 2. I really like dark aesthetics in my game. And specifically for the Dark Ages, I really enjoy it because if you get to that certain point where you have really heavy shadows, but all of the light sources, like the reds and the greens, really pop out more, there's just a right amount where it feels really ethereal and just, I don't know, cool looking. I'm just really into heavy shadows and really saturated light sources. And that's another thing I really love about the new Doom series is they don't shy away from hypersaturation, like the whole the really intense blues and greens of the pickups and the HUD display. I just love that. It's very kind of video gamey while still being, I don't know, it like adds to the world, I guess. I really just enjoy it. Anyway, with that out of the way, what is this game really like? Well, I think I was a little bit disappointed just in the sense that this feels like a sequel to Eternal rather than a full-blown new Doom feel and game and whatnot. 2016 to Eternal, it was very, very different. And the only way I think I've been able to describe it is that while Doom 2016 felt like a reinvention, a whole new kind of coat of paint, sort of more hyper-realistic-ish version of Doom, Eternal went kind of back to the roots with the whole kind of this is a video game kind of design, which I didn't hate, but there are just certain things about it that just felt, I don't know, the whole atmosphere was just kind of not as intense and as saturated as the original reboot. And so Dark Ages is kind of an in-between, but leans more towards Eternal's kind of gameplay, not gameplay focused, but like video gamey style game, where like, this is Doomslayer, he's like, kind of medieval now. And this is another thing that I really actually have an issue with the story and the presentation of the game, is that it kind of commits to the medieval aesthetic, but not fully. It's there, but it's not fully there. And again, the story is just, I don't know, I just shake my head. It's just not what I thought it was going to be. It feels more like Eternal's writing. You had in the beginning of 2016, like, the Doomslayer and the Codex thing, and to have this big monologue kind of thing, and it was all very kind of ominous, and, they kind of wanted to do this cool ancient, he's like an ancient guy, he's an ancient entity, and he has all this lore, and it's always alluded to, but now that you're kind of addressing it directly, it doesn't feel that much better or that much greater. It's like, yeah, okay, he's kind of eternal, kind of whatever, but the writing just feels more like Eternal. The whole point is that this is supposed to take place an unknown time in an unknown space, thousands, if not, however long in the past. And he's like an ancient slayer. And, all the NPCs, all of the, the knights, the sentinels, they kind of all talk like the human military. Super disappointing when you had the makers and, in this ancient timeline, they also basically talk like a bunch of politicians or the ancient military, like, wow, I can't believe he can survive the power surge. Like, I don't know how to describe my disappointment with just, I don't know. I mean, writing in a Doom game, who cares, right? But I expected some commitment to this setting. I just wish that I don't expect them to say thou and thee and whatever, but I expect them to, I don't know, act with different writing than a generic Marine or something, or a generic, United States Federation Space Force or something. So I was kind of let down in that aspect. Again, the other thing is that, it's medieval based, but kind of, yes, there are belts and chains and, all sorts of, spikes and more medieval focused thing. Aesthetic. Doomslayer, he now has a wolf coat, a wolf pelt on his back, and I wish there was more of a wolf theme, because it's like, okay, they worship wolves, they have statues of wolves, but they don't really go into why that is. It's just their animal, I guess, but it doesn't really go into it. There's not a wolf based motif, really anywhere else. And so just the whole lore and the universe that we were kind of promised, like this was supposed to be the lore game. This was supposed to be the origins of the Doomslayer, kind of, fleshing out what this world is, what is Argent D'Nur, what are these other worlds, creating sort of an ethereal feeling where you don't even need to explain everything. You just need to have the characters and the worlds built and act in a certain way that alludes to extra lore that is unhidden. But this just feels like the same environments as Eternal. Like, okay, here's like an evil layer, and why is this, thing here? Why is this here? Because it's an arena that you kill demons in. It's not really giving us what I think what we promised or we wanted, or at least what I wanted from it. I wanted more, okay, like tell me who this guy is, and they really don't tell anything else. And they kind of have this thing where one of the makers is of course like a renegade, so they still have this thing where the maker, you have to fight the makers in this thing. And of course it's revealed in Eternal's timeline where they've actually been screwing you over this whole time, and they're actually the real bad guys. I know this just feels like all of the things in Eternal that they wanted to do, but they simply did not have time. For example, I still could not get over my massive disappointment at the fact that the giant mech, that it was teased and shown and all throughout Doom Eternal's cutscenes and cinematics and trailers, even for like the Ancient Gods, was not playable. So finally in this game it's playable, and those sections are fine. They're okay, they're fun, but it's like, yeah, you're in a giant mech. You basically just have a combo system where you hit the enemy with R, you dodge, when they attack, and that builds up your meter, and then you can do 2 or 3 later special moves where it does massive damage to the enemy, and if you get hit, then you lose that meter and you just have to start over again. And it's just that that gameplay loops, rinse and repeat. So I understand how they have the idea of the mech and how cool it was, but actually playing those levels, you don't really feel like, you feel powerful, I guess, but it's not super interesting to actually play them. It's a very basic mechanic. I don't know if I were to redesign that or reinvent that, I think it'd be more interesting to operate the mech almost Titanfall style, where you could actually use the mech in normal maps. That would feel really cool. But once you get in the mech, you're in a specific map just for that mech with specific enemies that only react to the mech. It's not like you're trampling demons that you would normally have loads of difficulty with in the normal map. So that's kind of my issue. It's a very segmented off thing. It's not like you can summon the mech whenever you want, which is fine. They got the idea, they finally made it, and it was kind of, whatever. Again, so these are all ideas from Eternal. So this really feels like Eternal DLC that they kind of built up until it became its own full game. And that's kind of where, the best and worst parts of this game come out. Yes, I like Eternal, but I don't need more Eternal. I wanted something genuinely, like truly, truly different, and not only in gameplay, but also atmosphere. And so on the gameplay aspect, I'd say, yes, it is decently, I say it's different enough because you have a shield. So gone is fire belch and grenades and everything, and now you just have a shield, which honestly I think is a huge improvement. It actually does fit the aesthetic, the design. I remember when they first showed the trailer showing the chainsaw. I mean, technically, I guess, the shield is now the chainsaw. And so your alt fire for all your guns and your chainsaw and your equipment are all in one item, which is the shield. And I think it really is one of the coolest additions to the Doom universe. I've also I have to give huge props that the creativity from id and all these weapons have always just blown me away. The ballista and Eternal, the other like ballista energy thing from even the 2016. I just love the aesthetic, the look, the function, everything. The chainsaw shield, like you have to give props to that, because so many video games for such a long time took inspiration from movies and other media. And this is the first time, or not the first time, but one of the few times. Now, Actually, no. The games are pretty creative. This is just another example of something completely unique. I've never seen a chainsaw shield in any other piece of media. Maybe there's some 1970s kung fu, Hong Kong action movie that used it. I wouldn't know. But as far as I know, this is a completely, really new, interesting, original idea, and it's very, very creative, and I really do love it. So yeah, it's really cool. And not only, and the shield also acts as like a parry system, which is also really cool, which is again the main mechanic of this game. It's how you negate all damage. It's how you there's you can deflect personal melee attacks if you're close range, but also if you have ranged attacks and you deflect them, they'll do like a cool added attack bonus. And so this is one of the few. There's a bunch of upgrades. Of course, you upgrade your entire arsenal. You upgrade your melee attack, and you have 3 different types. And you also upgrade your parry ability, at least for ranged attacks. And so these range from creating like an earthquake, creating your auto cannon, which is still, I guess, around. They didn't want to totally, dismantle that. So your shoulder cannon comes up and fires. Another one is like this holy lightning, which comes and stuns everyone, which is the cheapest, most efficient way to play the game. And then you have my personal favorite, which is the holy swarm, where you basically just fire a bunch of Virgil knives at the enemy. Like I was kind of joking that these look like Virgil knives, but literally looking at them side by side, they are almost exactly the same design. Like someone obviously played Devil May Cry 5 and like, let's put this in Doom. I don't know. I love it. And yeah, I guess Doom and Devil May Cry do share some of that romantic gothic aesthetic a little bit in a weird way, especially with these more recent games. But anyway, I digress on that point. Yeah, so the other thing too is that the shield, it does everything. So it also replaces your alt fire while you would hold down the left trigger. So now, so not only the shield, it parries, you can also throw it and it'll stun, certain enemies. It'll just slice through weaker ones, and you're constantly using it to parry. On the higher difficulties, it's just constantly LR, shield fire, for really close quarters combat. And it's just hectic when it gets to that final stage. And I guess on that point, I would say that the difficulty, even on, I didn't play it on Aspiring because that's like the new story mode, and I never do those. I did, hurt me plenty, but it was still a little bit too easy, which I find a little bit odd. And then I changed to Nightmare, and I still thought, yeah, no, this is still a little bit easy once you kind of, because my whole perspective on it is that I realize is that if you really want to play the game on the hardest difficulty and get the full experience, playing it once on easy is almost like a tutorial. And so if you've enjoyed that, then you can go on and play it on the real difficulty, which would be Nightmare. Playing on Nightmare was actually pretty fun, especially with game speed up. But yeah, as I was saying, so you still have your arsenal of weapons now, but instead of having dual attachments and alt attachments, you just have only one fire mode for that gun, and then you just have its alt version, which you cycle through. And instead of being an attachment, it's a completely different weapon. So while in, and I kind of, forget this aspect, but the combat shotgun, for example, it would have 2 different modes. It had a grenade launcher and a triple shot in the very first game. And now if you switch it, it just goes to the double barrel shotgun. And so that kind of whole aspect of a certain gun having an alt fire mode is just gone now, basically. The different weapon is the alt fire mode in a way. I just remember what the double barrel did as its alt fire. I know it was like a chain thing in Eternal, but I'm not remembering right now. I honestly kind of prefer this mode, just because. Oh yeah, what they did, they actually did keep a double, fire mode, but they kept it in the menu. And so they kind of figured, what, we don't want people constantly shifting weapon types. Yes, we want people to keep shifting weapons, but the style of the secondary attack kind of should be set for the player's playstyle in the specific game they're going to play. So you actually have to go into the menu and select either mode. So for example, for the plasma gun, it's like, okay, either you keep the charge for ultimate, for continuous fire longer, and you keep the charge from decreasing, or as soon as you let go of firing, it did as a dispensation in a shockwave thing. And so you can't swap that on the fly. You have to go into the menu, which I think kind of is a better idea, honestly, because you're only really, once you've chosen your playstyle, you're only going to choose, yeah, this is the better way to do it. And I mean, on that point, I found it interesting because the shockwave, I mean, I always use that in the previous games, but in this one, the shockwave, as soon as you stop firing, you lose your charge. And it's like, okay, that's kind of weird because the charge was optional. You could press L to like dissipate it. But here's as soon as you stop firing, it dissipates, and you might not be around a bunch of enemies, which kind of ruins the point, and your charge is gone. So this is the first time I'm like, yeah, I'm not using the plasma shockwave. It's completely different and kind of wasted a lot, honestly. But if you're in a really high intense impact environment and that's constantly what you're doing, then I guess it kind of makes sense. Anyway, I could go into the details, the macro details of how every weapon is managed, but I won't go that far. I'll just give a brief overview. You have the Impaler and the Shredder, so these things kind of shoot, spikes, kind of sort of medieval. Then you have probably my favorite new addition, which is what's it called? The Punisher and the Revenger. That's another issue. I literally cannot remember the names of some of these weapons because they're just very kind of generic, like the Skull Gun. You know what I'm talking about when I say the Skull Gun. When I first saw the Skull Gun in Dark Ages trailers, I was super hype. I'm like, that is so gothic. That is so badass hardcore. And basically what it is, it's if you've never seen it, it's a gun that is chewing up a bunch of skulls as ammo and shooting them out as like ammunition. It is so freaking cool. And it's actually really fun to use. And what's really cool is that, again, it has two modes. They're two different guns, but they're really two different modes of the same gun, where you have one that is kind of like a wide shot shotgun, and so that's kind of for crowds, and the more enemies you take out while in the wide shot mode, it powers up and you move faster, while the alt mode is a narrow view, and when you fully upgrade it, it actually spews out health when you hit enemies. And so it takes longer to charge up, but once you get it to full charge, it glows blue and it actually makes you go slower, but the fire rate and the damage is just insane. Like, it just chews through boss's health. Like, it's literally just it's chewing through it. It's incredible how effective it is and how fun it is and how honestly kind of cheap it is, but it looks really cool. It's very fun. And yeah, the Shredder is kind of like an auto, like submachine gun thing, while its alt mode Impaler is like a headshot, one shot kind of thing, similar to the rifle, in the previous games. And then you have the chain gun, and that just shoots a giant ball and chain. And it's a very cool weapon, but it's a little bit weird in the sense that it doesn't have an alt. It's the only gun that doesn't have an alt fire mode. I was kind of surprised because literally every other one has one. It's kind of weird. And then finally you have the grenade launcher and the rocket launcher, which are pretty self-explanatory, pretty generic. I don't need to really go into them too much. One thing I did notice, though, a small detail, is that when you look at the rocket launcher in the character viewer, it has a symbol on the side, while in game it has a skull on the side. And this is a weird thing that I noticed. Maybe it's like a discrepancy on character model. I don't know. But in any case, I think those are pretty much most of the weapons. There's also the BFC, the big effing, or the Ballistic Force crossbow, as they officially call it, which is just the BFG. It's nothing really new, just a redesign of that weapon. And I know I'm forgetting something. We have the Impaler, the Plasma, the Skull Gun, Chain Gun, Rocket Launcher. No, I think that's actually it. So, I think technically that's less weapons than Eternal, but still, it feels like a good collection. And of course, the way it goes is that throughout the world, they've introduced, I guess I didn't have this in previous games, but they've introduced gold. And so you'll collect gold on the map, and it's a one-time pickup. So once you pick it up, it's part of like total completion percentage. And also you get gold for completing certain objectives. Also side objectives and missions, you get things like rubies, and then finally wraith stones, which are super rare. and these are used to upgrade, you know, the final materials to upgrade your melee, your parry, and your guns. And once you do the final upgrade with the Wraith Stone, then you have an overall challenge saying like kill 300 demons with this gun. And so that's kind of how the game kind of shifts and goes and so on. Again, what's very nice about this game, similar to Eternal, is that when you do each level, it specifically lays out what you found, what you're missing, and what you need to find. So I know I just really appreciate that, and the auto map is really, really good. If you go even somewhere remotely close to a secret, it'll pop up on your thing and say, "Hey, there's a secret here." It's up to you to figure out how to get to it, essentially. And I don't think I didn't really have a huge deal. There were a couple secrets where I like knew where it was in the map. I saw it, and I literally had no idea what to do. Sometimes it was just like some boxes you had to climb. Sometimes you had to like find a certain switch in a corner that would turn off, you know, the fire chutes or whatever. But mostly it was pretty straightforward and very enjoyable. But yeah, no, overall it's pretty pretty fun, pretty forgiving with, you know, finding stuff in the map. It's like you might have to look up a guide once or twice, but it's pretty straightforward. Um, but yeah, so and I forgot the whole melee aspect. So of course they still have your kind of blood punch or your melee, you know, generally in this game. Also, glory kills are gone. I should have mentioned that. So that's a pretty big change. So glory kills are completely gone. They do happen in certain bosses, just, you know, by default. Actually, sorry, glory kills technically are not gone. When you get an enemy to really low health, you just press melee to, you know, automatically defeat them essentially. And you know, in the previous games, you would you know, take it from every, depending on the angle you would attack them from, it would have a different glory kill. But now it's just a generic punch. So I don't know. They just wanted to kind of get away from the glory kill system. Realize, yeah, that wasn't really worth it or wasn't really good. So that's just kind of gone. You'll do a normal attack, which I kind of thought, well, you have all these animations, you might as well use them, right? You still can't glory kill though the low level enemies. I think they understood that that was kind of just like kind of a time waster and over cinematic thing that they do. And sure enough, in Eternal, the ability that you can equip to speed up glory kills, I always equip that because it's like, let me just get on with the game. Don't interrupt my flow. Let me run and gun, basically. But yeah, so you still have your punch, but the cool thing now is the thing that they've teased is you have a flail, and later you get a mace. And so the flail feels really good. Later on, it becomes upgraded to be a fire flail. And again, this is part of the whole medieval aesthetic. And so, yeah, it's just kind of such a letdown that, you know, they went for this whole medieval thing, and like some weapons have it and some weapons don't at all. Like the plasma gun is still a plasma gun. It's not medievalified at all. But certain weapons have, though, like the whole skull thing. That's very kind of, you know, gothic metal medieval. Sure, I can give you that. The chainball gun, absolutely. Like the rocket launcher. I mean, or even the friggin' ballista in Eternal. Like that's the ballista is a medieval like wartime weapon. Like they could have done something like maybe make the rocket launcher or the grenade launcher a mini trebuchet or something. Like you have an arcing exploding ball, like, you know, do something there. But so they kind of half committed. And again, why is the Doomslayer wearing, he still has like the cutoff parts on his forearms or whatever, why is he wearing a wolf skin? Like what's up with that? This feels like it's supposed to be in the ancient past, but it still feels very much in the Eternal timeline. There's still technology, there's still, you know, maker technology, which is like fine, okay, you know, I'll give them that, the makers. But the Sentinels still feel like the Sentinels in Eternal. It's like their technology has not really evolved. There really isn't this idea that you've gone back in time thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to the original Slayer. Like this feels, that's my problem. It feels very much like Eternal in terms of its story, its atmosphere, its design. It's like, okay, who cares? Of course, another big aspect to the gameplay they added was sprinting, so now you can sprint. So obviously, yeah, it's not a slow game at all. But yeah, no, I don't know. Just the atmosphere, the feeling that you're in an ancient past, and yes, you can have sci-fi elements in there, but instead of having a plasma gun, have a lightning gun. Instead of a I know you can't really replace the shotgun, honestly. A shotgun is a shotgun. I don't know what you would do with that. Um, the crossbow, I mean, that's obviously medieval style. So my issue is that they wanted to go for this medieval world, this medieval universe, the medieval style, and they really only half committed to it. It's like some things are medieval, but some things are just not at all. Like the rocket launcher, just no real redesign whatsoever. Um, and the characters don't act differently, and the story, the world doesn't act differently, and this was supposed to be like a really big shift, like in time and in space, and you just don't feel that. It just feels like DLC to Eternal, which is just, I don't know, that's just a real big letdown aesthetically, to me, I guess. So yeah, it's just more Eternal, which again isn't bad, but not what I exactly want. The ancient slayer, like, where did he come from? They're still not really telling you. They're still just basically, yeah, he's some guy that the makers made somehow, and they also made him so powerful that it can't control him. Why? I don't know. Is he made of some special stuff? You don't know. You never see his creation. You do see his resurrection. I think it was very funny in Donkey's video, where he essentially said, "Oh yeah, Doom Guy actually dies in this one, and he's replaced with Captain America," which is true because he's throwing the shield and whatever. But what I think that's really funny about that joke is that it's true. Doom Guy actually does die in this game. Actually, I should say Doom Slayer, because I think the kind of pseudo canon is that Doom Guy and Doom Slayer are two different entities, which makes sense because in Doom 1 you were just supposed to be some generic Space Marine who was just battling demons. Like, okay. But yeah, the whole, Doom Slayer and his origin story. So yeah, no, he dies. He gets sent to hell. He's like a skeleton, and then through a ritual, they resurrect him into a flesh and blood body. So they kind of have make kind of a God of War thing going on where he can't really die. But I thought it'd be interesting to really go into that more, because the whole point is that the makers are creating demons to torment humans while aligning with the humans or the Sentinels or whatever, because they get their loosh. Essentially, they power their energy source via suffering and all these underground mines and whatever. And so that's basically their energy source in the big conspiracy. So it makes sense if Doomslayer was actually made from that energy, that his rage and his sorrow actually fuel his life force, because that's how the makers power their energy. So if suffering and human emotions are essentially an energy source, it would make sense that Doomslayer and his eternal rage and his non-verbal autistic killing spree literally would revive him, because it would make in-world sense that that's how it would function. But they just never really come to that conclusion. It's just like, yeah, you can resurrect because reasons. And honestly, I don't really expect a lot of really well thought out lore from the id team. I expect it to be aesthetic and cool and look really nifty, but I don't know. I would have liked if it was a little bit more well thought out, but that's just me. And yeah, the story is, how would I say this? Self-isolationist. It's very much, like there's an ancient Doomslayer. Like if you were to do the origin story of the Doomslayer, this would feel like a spin-off to that story. Whereas like, yeah, he's in the ancient world of Argent D'Nur. He is helping the Sentinels fight demons because there's this new prince on the block called Arak Araz or something, who has this witch who's told him, hey, you can get this energy source from this race of beings called the Wraiths, who are actually the progenitors of the human race of the Sentinels, even though they're these weird tentacly, whatever things. And you can actually get the soul, the soul of humans are actually the ultimate energy source and the royal bloodline. And so the princess, if you can get her energy source, you can actually absorb the power that the makers use and use that to overpower the Sentinels and completely destroy the humans and even the makers and take them over. And so there's this big kind of just subplot where, like, yeah, there's some demon king knight guy. I do have to say though, the design of the witch, the hell priest, and the demon prince, Iraq or Raz or whatever, is fantastic. I absolutely love it, especially when he goes into his final form. He has this kind of multi-wing aesthetic with eyes lined in it, and it actually reminded me, weirdly enough, of Kirby the Forgotten Land. When you have the final boss, it's I think he transforms. Normally he turns blue, or he's like, he does this like angel form at the end of that, and I think, God, I actually forget his name. I want to say Hupo, but that's Klonoa. And so he transforms into this, giant, angelic, ultimate, JRPG kind of boss. And I always kind of laughed because that boss fight in Kirby with the Forgotten Land was way harder than Doom, Dark Ages. Also in that aspect, yeah, no, it was when you did the tournament, I think. The extra tournament, the final tournament in Forgotten Land, that's when he turned white, and also with all this fire and red stuff around there. And that's where his form there very much reflects the ultimate boss in Iraq in this game, or Raz in this game. Again, also on that point, I found it was a little bit not super anticlimactic, but I found it weird that chapter 21 of 22 was called the final battle, and it really is the final battle where you defeat the ultimate version of this guy. But then you have an extra chapter. It almost should have been called Encore or something, where chapter 22 you go back to hell and you chase down this guy who was defeated, and you actually finally kill him. I would have honestly been fine with him being banished, because this whole thing, you can never really truly kill evil or a demon or idea, and he'd be just banished to like the nether realm. You actually go back and actually kill him. So it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. It kind of would have been nice as like maybe the intro level to the next game, but hey, I'm a game designer. But I do like the fact they had like almost like a fun level, an encore, to just give you a really hard, intense level with, the sort of arenas from 2016, a kind of a callback to that, and then finally a final showdown with the final bad guy and his demon ship. So that was pretty tight. And you kill the witch and him at the same time. I kind of thought the witch would be like a mid-game boss or like somewhere in there, but not at all. They kind of fall together in the same area or the same thing or whatever. And then with story ends with, we killed the bad guy, the demons run away, they have the boon, which is that the princess now, because he's after this thing called the Heart of Argent, which is just a container for human souls, to extract souls. So he extracts the soul of the princess and then uses that to power himself up. And then he loses it and returns the soul, and the soul is returned back to the princess. And now she has this special ability where she can, it was kind of lame a little bit. She can use this like tentacle power to like go through the ground and kill demons. And like, that's it. Like, I kind of would have liked it better if it wasn't explained. It was kind of alluded, oh, she has this magical power now that is unexplained, and it's going to just help us out and harness more energy from, the world now, but doesn't fully explained. There's also one of the makers, like the first second of seeing the maker character, who is a fat guy in a floating chair. It's like, I know I'm gonna have to kill this guy. Like, a fat guy in any game, especially Doom game, he's evil and you have to kill him. Like, it's just kind of like, it's so intuitive. And so what is it, Creed Maker? That's his name, Creed. And I don't know, he's a character, I guess, but I just hate how all of these advanced alien races, or even the demons, talk like humans. I'm just very picky about writing in recent years, and I just really wish that a demon would, or an angelic being would not talk like, oh, you have to make sure we don't overpower the Doomslayer. And instead of speaking in you don't even have to speak differently. You just have to have a different perspective on the entire matter. Like, you have to look down on humans as, well, not humans as, tools or something. I don't know. But it feels more like political intrigue, which is just, not great. And so he turns against you, you defeat him, you kill him, and then they say like, oh yeah, the church apologizes. He was acting alone and he was a renegade agent, and we're sorry. And this is enough for King Norvik to be like, oh okay, yeah, okay, fine, yeah. And again, King Norvik and all these other characters, they just feel super generic, which is fine, I guess. But I know there's so much wasted potential. Like this king, this ancient civilization, it'd be really cool if he had like a speech to give, but no, the princess gives the speech at the end of the game about like some we will always fight and some super generic thing. When I think of speeches in games, I think of the Solarian Commander in Mass Effect 1 on the beaches of Vermeer. I think about even the opening to Gears of War 2. I cannot skip the opening to Gears of War 2 because Chairman Prescott's speech, even though he's kind of a scummy guy, is so invigorating. It's so good that I love it. Anyway, and yeah, so the world and the characters just feel so generic, and they don't feel like they're stuck in the ancient past. They still feel like they're in Eternal, and I've said that. But yeah, the game ends with basically, yeah, okay, you killed the demon prince, and now you're back on the Maker ship, and it's this weird thing where the Doomslayer was basically mind controlled by the Makers. He was basically created just to kill demons, right? And it's not specific why he's special. He just is, and you never see why or how. But he's mind controlled, and like a quarter through the game, he breaks free of the mind control. But by the end of the game, he's still like his eyes are clear, and he's still optionally, voluntarily working for the Makers at this point, just so he can kill demons. So it's more like a cooperative stance, I guess. But it doesn't really go into like, okay, so what was accomplished? There was a demon king in an ancient time, and the Doomslayer killed him. Like this whole thing felt like a side story. It didn't really build on anything, and I'm not really expecting it to, but I'm expecting it to at least be different. So that's my whole kind of takeaway. It's in terms of the Doom saga or lore. I mean, it's interesting from a gameplay perspective, but it's not super necessary to, I don't know. In the future of the franchise, will the Dark Ages be a must play to fully get the full scope of the game? Not really. Like, we know who the Makers are. You don't need to know about this Arzak guy because there's nothing he really does that is long term. It's like, okay, you can extract souls from humans. Like, you could reintroduce that concept in another game. So yeah, it feels very much like a weird experimental thing. They started with Eternal, and they just kind of said, well, let's just make a full game of it. And I don't know. It's kind of, it's one foot is in Eternal, and one foot it is in a new direction that they couldn't really go anywhere. And I think that brings me finally to the second half of the campaign. I really thought it was like the last third, but it's really the second half where at a certain point you get sucked into a different dimension, and I don't know how else to say this, so I'll just say this, but the second half of the campaign is the Cthulhu Lovecraft arc. And again, I had just no idea where this was going. I thought they were going for a medieval vibe, and they're like, you know what? Nah, we don't care about that. Even though the medieval aspect, like the whole medieval world is Argent d'Nur, which has remained unchanged from the Eternal timeline. Like all the architecture's the same, all the scenery is more or less the same. There's still wolf statues, unexplained. It's just the same thing. There's no real new medieval aesthetics except like some towns, kind of. But yeah, it's not really anything we haven't seen in Eternal. And so it's like, okay, so when's the medieval part going to really start? And so halfway through, they're like, you know what? Let's do cosmic horror instead. And you're like, all right, I guess. And I mean, it is cool though, because I'll just spoil it. Like eventually, like the second last level, you have to fight Mecha Cthulhu in a giant mech fist-to-fist gunfight. And gun and fist fight. And it's really cool. I actually really, really like that. Oh, we're like, a Doomslayer is literally killing ancient, cosmic horror gods. This is actually so cool in a giant mech fist fight. Like, that's a selling point. That's really, really cool. But at the same token, it doesn't feel fully developed, or in a way, I don't know how to describe this. Like, they kind of get to the halfway point of the game and like, okay, we're going to do this whole Cthulhu arc where you go into the cyclopean universe of of these creatures. Now I will have to say that this entire arc, I've never seen a Lovecraftian world um, depicted so interestingly and accurately. If you've read, I think it's the Call of Cthulhu by Lovecraft, also the Innismouth story. It talks about this cyclopean uniform architecture based around eyes and stuff, and I've never seen it as well as depicted, even in like official Lovecraft games, as I have in this Doom game, which is just wild to me. Um, and I think it's really cool. I think they also took a more modern approach to Cthulhu, where he's not just a squid thing, but he also has a bunch of bat wings. And so it's very kind of a new contemporary version of Cthulhu and Lovecraft. And I don't know, I thought it was really cool. But the kind of issue I have is that the second half of the campaign is stuck in this Cthulhu. Like, there's multiple levels where you're in this Cthulhu universe. And it just feels like they were just going, saying, hey, let's do Cthulhu, let's do Lovecraft now. And they were getting into it. They made a few like really solid levels. And then they said, so how are we ending this game again? What about that whole demon thing? And they're like, oh yeah, we should probably go back and like do that. And so you kind of have this nice side journey, this nice different aesthetic change, which again, so it's like partially medieval, partially cosmic horror, partially Doom. So it's a combination of a whole bunch of different things that are kind of mixed together, but don't really have a cohesive whole. Which is why at the end I just felt like, yeah, I guess I was just playing Eternal again, which is kind of, an unfortunate takeaway. I mean, the game is very fun. I just wish it had a very universal or distinct aesthetic. Like 2016 was very, very distinct. We're doing demons, energy, and technology. They're doing ancient blood magic and technology and fuse those together, and kind of a Goetia-esque like take on these demons. It's like, okay, cool. And you're going to hell, and there's like ancient writing and scripts and everything. It's like, and that's the other thing, man. The 2016 load screens, those just hit so well. Those are some of my favorite load screens in all of gaming, like the demon thing. And if you're going to a UAC level, it's all technology. It was blue and red and blue and red. It was so distinct. It was really cool. 2016 had a very distinct identity and aesthetic, while Eternal was like, let's do a video game-ish kind of video game. And that's why Dark Ages I felt was going to have a more distinct aesthetic. Like, it was like, okay, this is medieval Doom. But no, it's just more of a video game-ish video game. So, I mean, whatever. It is what it is. It's a fun game, but the aesthetic and the identity of it is really not there. I guess that's the other thing I should mention on is presentation and music. So as we know, Mick Gordon is not on this game just because of how, if you've seen his tremendously terrible treatment by id, in the fact, I mean, he was in Australia doing all the recordings, and they did everything from, last minute changes, using a lot of his music without paying him for it. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but the way Mick was treated and how he's a micro celebrity is just frankly appalling, and a really dark insight into how the industry, like, and you hear things about crunch and how someone they might force people to work overtime and whatnot, but then there's that, and there's just straight up abuse. And so obviously Mick was like, I'm never working with you guys again. And so does the game suffer from that? I would say honestly, not really. I mean, as distinct and as iconic Mick's music is, I never really liked it because it's just heavy, hyper industrial, hyper noisy, heavy sounds that just are just very loud. It's just very loud music. It's not very pleasant to listen to. It kind of fits the gameplay somewhat, but here they have more, I guess, yeah, it's more generic for sure, but to me, it wasn't a huge letdown. I think I really do miss the 2016 main menu theme, just the vibe it gave off. It had a mixture of like light industrial noises and then heavy guitars and then it would go light again. I thought it was really, really interesting and cool. And again, gave it more of an identity. Here it just feels more generic, but again, it didn't really bother me, to be honest. Yeah, aside from that, I can't really think of much else to say about this one. It definitely is a lot of fun. If you are a fan of Doom games, definitely pick this up. But it's kind of like, is this a must play? If you're not a Doom fan, like, not really. I mean, you could play Eternal and honestly kind of get the same kind of vibe. It really feels like Eternal 2, which is the best and worst thing I guess I could say about it. One thing I have to say, I was super salty about how they changed the plasma rifle in Eternal, where they made it to the old school style, which just looks so dumb. The plasma rifle is back, but it's still not as good as it was in 2016, just aesthetically. But I will say this game's strongest points are obviously the gameplay, the aesthetics, and I guess on the gameplay aspect, I should have brought this up, but I tried after I beat the game, I tried playing it on Nightmare on like 150% game speed. So that's the one thing you can shift in this game is game speed. And honestly, I felt that was the most fun way to play the game, and it wasn't super hard either. And this is kind of goes off into a tangent that I think modern games, their main problem is that they don't prioritize speed. Even like just loading into a game, old games, they don't have user license agreements. They don't have a bunch of logos. The game just starts. You press start. You're in the game, and it's immediate. It's vibrant. It's there. It's alive in front of you. It's not hidden behind a bunch of menus and store items and whatnot. And I don't know. And Classic Doom is also a super hyper fast game where it's very unrealistic how fast you're moving, but it feels amazing. And that's the one thing I cannot further recommend is that do try this game at the fastest game speed setting, because that is how I want my games to play. It's like Sonic, and I really just super enjoyed it. But yeah, besides that, I don't have much else to say about this game. It's definitely fun. It's cool, but it's just more of Eternal to be honest with you. And even though they've completely changed like the main mechanics, it still was okay. And it took me about 3 days to fully complete the game. One day to do half the campaign, another day to do the other half the campaign. And these are like 6-hour sessions, and then a third day to go back and find all of the secrets and all the little pickups and everything. Again, it feels like very much a side story, but I kind of was hoping for something like a proper. It calls weird to call it a trilogy because it's so similar to Eternal in so many aspects that I don't know what else to say about it. But yeah, it's a fun game. It's a decent game, but it's also just a Doom game. You're kind of getting what you've been known to expect at this point, which is the best and worst thing about it. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say about it. I'll catch you later, guys. And again, hope you enjoy this one. Bye.